George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Old age pensioners from freezing to death in what is expected to be a long, cold winter. But the very next day, the British Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, the Idi Amin of British politics, goes to Kiev and hands over more than half the cost of the saving by freezing our pensioners to death. £600 million of your money, if you're a British taxpayer, handed over to the thief of Kiev, Volodymyr Zelensky. And Trump falls like a stone in the debate with Kamala Harris. She soars like a bird, but then the wind beneath her wings were the utterly, ridiculously biased ABC panel, which introduced and conducted the debate. Nonetheless, it could be an election game changer. And another UN compound has been bombed by Israel using American bombs, killing 14 families worth of refugees sheltering there. And of course, is it the case that nobody knows who's going to win Western elections, except they know Israel is going to come up on top? The Dutch auction between Trump and Kamala over who loved Israel the most contrasts rather vividly with the views of ordinary people. And on the anniversary of 9/11, not the one that destroyed democracy in Chile and introduced decades of military junta and fascism to that country, but the one that set the course for the entirety so far of the 21st century. The one that occurred in New York and Washington and perhaps elsewhere. The one that killed 3,000 Americans, the response to which killed an uncountable number of millions of people all over the world. We'll chart the growing chasm between the official account of 9/11 and the broader public's view of those events. It's going to be a bumpy night, so fasten your seatbelt. It is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The cheers and the fist bumping of Labour members of Parliament as they metaphorically cut the throats of 4,000 old age pensioners in Britain by cutting off their winter fuel allowance. I'm using a figure of 4,000 because that's the official Labour government figures of how many pensioners will die as a result of the removal of the cold weather allowance by Labour MPs in the House of Commons yesterday. Only one single solitary Labour member of Parliament voted against a cut which even the Conservatives had not dared to make. The cheering of Labour MPs was so ignominious that it can be said to be a day of infamy, and the laughter and jeering of the victorious Labour side when the result of the voting came through will reverberate through the remainder of this Parliament, haunt Labour all the way to its electoral grave, starting next Thursday with the by-election in the Harrow Road ward in London. I apologise, I'm improperly clad. I've been on the campaign trail all day, and I'm telling you now, remember you heard it here, there's going to be a sensational result in that local government by-election, and not least because of the Labour government's slaughter of the OAPs. You know, during the COVID crisis, we all had to sacrifice so much because it was so necessary to save the grannies. Well, last night, Labour killed the grannies. And to add insult to injury, the very next day, David Lammy handed over £600 million more to Ukraine, to Zelensky and his unelected, undemocratic junta that is still in power for the time being in the capital of Kiev. Last night was a very bad night for Donald Trump. He was flat, he was repetitive, he had few, if any, zingers, phrases that will last and live. He looked bemused at the unexpectedly powerful performance of the Democratic Party nominee Kamala Harris, the current vice president in the Biden-Harris administration. Mind you, expectations of her were so low that so long as her trousers didn't fall down at the podium, it would have been judged an above-average performance by her. As long as she didn't meander off through a word salad cackling like a hyena, she would have been adjudged to have performed well. But she performed much better than that. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, I despise Kamala Harris and Joe Biden with every fiber of my being. I don't want Donald Trump to be the president of the United States, but I want Kamala Harris even less. And so dispassionately I can say, as something of a debater over the decades myself, that it was a disastrous performance by Donald Trump. She, on the other hand, soared like an American eagle. Well, maybe not quite. Let's call her a seagull. She soared like a seagull throughout the debate. But the wind beneath her wings were provided by an astoundingly biased performance by ABC, the hosts of the debate, and the so-called fact-checking which they did. They didn't actually check any of the false facts uttered throughout the debate by Harris, but remorselessly fact-checked Donald Trump's, admittedly at times, absurd exaggeration. Anyone who was thinking of going to Springfield, Ohio, would be ill-advised to take their pet with them because, according to Donald Trump, your dog or cat will be eaten on sight by Haitian illegal aliens, as he put it. It was a very salutary reminder that a week is a long time in politics, or at least the distance between one debate and another debate is a long time in politics. So comprehensive was Joe Biden's defeat by Donald Trump in the first debate that Biden was overthrown in a palace coup. He possibly still does not even know what happened to him, but he is enjoying life on a deck chair in Delaware in the middle of multiple international crises. But last night could well be an election game changer. I don't know if Trump will want to do another debate. I don't know if Harris will want to do another debate. She may want to quit while she's ahead, and definitely on last night's performance, she definitely was ahead. I've been saying here for weeks, actually months, that Donald Trump has lost something of his mojo. And before he was shot in the head by an assailant, inexplicably missed by the Biden administration's Federal Bureau of Investigation and its panoply of intelligence organizations. It was before that I noticed that Donald Trump was losing some of his zing. And last night established it beyond contradiction. The remarkable thing is that Donald Trump's team agreed to a setup, for that's what it was. It was a setup with two mainstream media hacks who were determined to do everything that they were asked to do to help Harris through the debate, to give her opportunities to score goals and to deny Donald Trump any opportunities to score. And they did everything that was asked of them. But the mystery is why Donald Trump himself, with the bully pulpit in front of him, with all his experience now of these kinds of affairs, did not even remotely successfully rebut the lies that Harris was telling about him. He was himself meandering off on tangents about obscure lawsuits against himself, seeking to justify himself in obscure charges and indictments and the rest, which most Americans had long concluded were politically motivated, the weaponization of the legal system to try to defeat him. He failed to land knockout blows. She at one point questioned the intellectual cognition of Donald Trump. He could have knocked her flat by saying, "You conspired against the Republic for years about the fact that your president was completely gaga, was incapable of biting his nails or controlling his bowels. You kept telling the American people that Joe Biden was sharp behind closed doors when you knew that he was a driveling idiot for most, if not all, of his presidency." He didn't even say any of that, never mind as powerfully as that. He allowed her to place in question his cognition, his ability to think and to govern, without mentioning the state of Joe Biden ever since. Only time for one more point on this. And this is the point I had to leave the room and put the kettle on. And it was the middle of the night for us. I could not bear to watch both presidential candidates vie with each other in a Dutch auction as to who loved and supported Israel the most. They were outbidding each other second by second. And so, as I alluded earlier, Lenin once said that the only thing sure about Western elections is who's going to lose them. He meant the working class. The only thing sure about the American election is who's going to win it. And that is the state of Israel. The same Israel which this day has destroyed yet another compound of the United Nations in Gaza and slaughtered still more innocent civilians, most of them women and children, as is the case in every single massacre. It's been a week of massacres, unprecedented massacres, even by the standards of the last 11 months. It was like it was the first day of the war against the inmates, the captives in the concentration camp that is Gaza. The bombing of tents with 2,000 pound bombs, giant missile-sized bombs on people in tents, destroyed the lives of scores of women and children earlier in the week in the Jabalia camp, a camp I know so well, or knew so well. For that's what it looks like now. If this is not genocide that you are watching on the screen, if this is legal military targeting that you are watching on the screen, then I, myself, am a Dutchman. I'm so old I remember the ICJ, the world's highest court, declaring this plausibly a case of genocide. It was so long ago, 6 months ago, and nothing has been done to put that judgment into effect. I'm so old I remember the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court asking the court to issue arrest warrants for the perpetrators of this plausible case of genocide. And absolutely nothing has happened, proving what I said when the ICC was set up. I'm one of these rare beasts that will declare publicly I opposed the establishment of the ICC. Because, as I predicted at the time, when it was going through Parliament, only Africans and Serbians will ever stand trial at it. The empire and its auxiliaries will never appear before this International Criminal Court. And that's exactly how it turned out to be. So Israel sits in the UN. It has all the privileges of a United Nations member. Their state was established by the United Nations. But Israel in 11 months has killed hundreds of United Nations employees, has destroyed virtually every brick of every United Nations installation in Gaza, and has just slaughtered more refugees sheltering in a UN compound this last 24 hours. I need to push on to what will be a major issue in the show tonight. There is a yawning chasm between the official narrative, the official account of 9/11, and the public's perception of what happened there. And there is no doubt, even me, who for years resisted the pressure of the so-called conspiracy theorists, have come to certain conclusions which it would be intellectually dishonest, morally dishonest for me not to share with you. I simply cannot accept the narrative of Building 7. I simply can't accept that the man who bought just a couple of months before the entire 9/11 compound and took out insurance which helpfully included terrorism, and then watched while the Twin Towers were brought down and then Building 7 fell down all of its own. I can no longer accept the explanations previously given about that. But here's breaking news. I believe that whatever hit the Pentagon on 9/11, whatever it was not a Boeing commercial airliner. I have now watched over and over and over again the newly released footage of the impact on the front of the Pentagon, which no pilot, never mind a rookie student pilot, could possibly have achieved. Moreover, it was of a different size and at a vastly different speed that projectile, whatever it was, hit the front of the Pentagon. Why is that important? Well, for two very important reasons. First of all, what happened to the airliner that was supposed to have hit the front of the Pentagon? If it did not hit the front of the Pentagon, what happened to it? Where is it? And if Building 7 did not fall as a result of the impact on the Twin Towers, how and why did it fall? You see, the problem, to continue the metaphor, with removing cornerstones is that the whole edifice begins to tumble. If one fundamental thing is untrue, it begins to bring down everything else that we believed in. We'll be talking to an important individual, Ted Walter, Executive Director of the International Center for 9/11 Justice and Director of Peace. We'll be talking to him in just a few minutes. None of which is to deny that what happened on 9/11 was not a complete, unmitigated human tragedy, disaster of enormous consequences, not just for the 3,000 people who were killed in these events, but for the whole world. Because it can truthfully be said that that one day, 9/11, 2001, has set the course for all of the 21st century to date with no sign of that course being altered. It precipitated a clash, a battle, a war, a raging war throughout the world, which shows no signs of abating. And so the entire world political situation began on this day in 2001. It doesn't get any more important than that. Stand by. Stay tuned. This is the mother of all talk shows.
Many people today struggle with the common mainstream media consumer. These types of people are mindless zombies. Instead of living authentically, they feed off masking their true thoughts and feelings, doing nothing and criticizing those who actually do their research. This type of media consumer can be highly manipulative, so here are some golden standard clapbacks when they start with their propaganda. When they say you are too much for them, show them a mirror and tell them to look for less. Draw a diagram of where your business is and their business is, to visually show them they are in the wrong area. When they say, please watch this clip from this reputable BBC journalist, remind them that there are no longer any reputable BBC journalists, and to instead watch the mother of all talk shows for some real journalism. The next time you encounter a brainwashed zombie, hold your head high and know their obsession to eat your brain is masking their jealousy of your confidence, your freedom in self-expression, and most importantly, your authenticity. Keep listening to learn more on the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So look, this is quite significant. 21,658 people have already voted on this poll. Do you believe the official account of 9/11? Now, the answer is yes or no. But listen to the numbers so far of those who don't believe it. 96% on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. 90% on Twitter, on my X account. 93% on the YouTube community poll. And 95% on the YouTube stream. These are enormous numbers. They constitute what I described earlier as a yawning chasm between the official account and the widely believed series of doubts which have multiplied over the years since the event. So have your say. Let's make this a super big poll and get a clear result. Do you believe the official account of 9/11? Yes or no? On Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. And here are the numbers if you want to call in and have your say on the show. Toll free in the United States, +1 844 944 3344, and free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Now, as I said, Ted Walter is the Executive Director of the International Center for 9/11 Justice and Director of Peace, War and 9/11. Ted, thanks for joining us on what I'm sure was a busy day and will be a busy day for you. Let's start with the British angle on this and the news of an important court legal breakthrough for a British citizen killed on the day. Please explain to the audience what's happened.
Yeah, well, George, thank you very much for having me on the 23rd anniversary of this solemn day. I really appreciate it. This case, some of your listeners may have heard of it, but it hasn't gotten enough attention. It's the family of Jeff Campbell, who died in the North Tower of on 9/11. And he was 31 at the time, and he was a British citizen. And his remains were repatriated to the UK over a series of years. And finally, there was an inquest held for him and 9 other British citizens in 2013. The whole proceeding took about 2 hours. It was a rubber stamp hearing, and the official cause of his death now following that inquest is that he died because American Airlines Flight 11 caused the collapse of the North Tower, thus killing him. And so ever since then, his family has been trying to reopen the inquest. They were not present at the inquest, but they quickly heard of the conclusion. And ever since then, they have been trying to reopen the inquest because they believe that that official cause of death is untrue. They believe that the building did not collapse due to the airliner hitting it. And under British law, there is a process that makes it actually quite easy for families, if they believe that the official finding is untrue and they believe that they have new evidence that was not considered at the first inquest, to reopen the inquest. And it's really, the test for this is not difficult. Really, any new evidence that could possibly, even has the remotest chance of calling into question the original conclusion is supposed to trigger a new inquest. Not only that, not only do they have actually thousands of pages of evidence that was not considered at the first inquest in 2013, they also, you can also ask for a new inquest when it's provable that the coroner did not conduct a sufficient inquiry. So in the case of this inquest, the coroner simply concluded that the airplane caused the collapse of the building without hearing even a shred of evidence to support that conclusion. So they have a very clear-cut case that there was an insufficiency of inquiry at this inquest. And so in 2021, 3 years ago in August, they submitted a 2,500-page application with lots of new evidence and legal grounds for reopening their inquest. They submitted it to the Attorney General for England and Wales. And the Attorney General sat on that application for almost 2 years. And finally, in July of last year, issued a decision denying the family the right to apply to the High Court for the new inquest to be granted. And so the family was going to challenge that decision a year ago and gave the Attorney General notice. The Attorney General suddenly turned around and withdrew the decision. After 2 years of working on this decision, supposedly turned around and withdrew it. And then 5 months later, in January of this year, issued yet another decision denying their right to apply for a new inquest to the High Court. And so now they are taking the Attorney General to court. They are filing for judicial review of the Attorney General's decision, and they will be making that filing on Friday, 2 days from now.
And what sort of case are they going to make, Ted?
Well, if you would read the Attorney General's decision, it would be clear to you, George, and it's clear to anybody who reads it, that the Attorney General did not engage with the evidence whatsoever. The Attorney General has put out a series of completely ludicrous reasons, simply just dismissing the evidence as fanciful, saying that the consensus view is that the Twin Towers collapsed due to the airplane impacts and the fires, and therefore there's no grounds for reopening the inquest. We can show based on the letter of the law that the Attorney General has broken the law in a severe way in not engaging with the evidence at all, not giving any reason for favoring one set of experts' opinions over another, and in many other ways, actually using an incorrect legal test, setting the bar too high for how compelling that evidence must be. It is actually not the Attorney General's job to assess the validity of the evidence. If there's any evidence that even at face value could possibly call into question the original conclusion, the family is supposed to be entitled to a new inquest. So we think we actually have a very good chance of winning at the High Court. The family does. And we are optimistic that the new Attorney General, who took office in July, will actually not elect to defend the previous Attorney General, Victoria Prentice's decision, and that the new Attorney General will withdraw this decision. And that is what we are asking the Attorney General to do. We're filing with the High Court, but the family is also asking the Attorney General to avoid this whole judicial review process, withdraw the decision, and finally allow the inquest to go forward 3 years after the family originally asked for it.
And is it the contention that whilst no one can doubt that airplanes struck the Twin Towers, that cannot have been the reason for their precipitous collapse, based on engineering and scientific evidence that this impact would not have caused the collapse of the towers?
Yeah, that's correct, George. The family, as I mentioned, submitted 2,500 pages of evidence 3 years ago, and that consisted of expert statements from 6 expert witnesses providing evidence, and just thousands of pages of attachments and scientific papers and studies and reports showing that the buildings could not have collapsed due to fire, and showing the overwhelming evidence that they were brought down with explosives and incendiaries. The application also included original statements from 5 eyewitnesses to the destruction of the towers, all of whom believed that the building had been brought down that the building had exploded or collapsed due to explosices. Now, George, I'm not seeing you anymore.
I'm seeing you fine and hearing you very clear. Many in the audience, not me now, I may say, but many in the audience will balk at the sheer level, a Himalayan, Everestian level of conspiracy that would have to have occurred for this case to be found correct and truthful. And many people balk at that. You can understand why. But when we see the conduct of our affairs, the conduct of our governments on many other issues, as each year goes by, somehow that Himalayan mountain range of skepticism begins to shrink. And you heard me say what the poll's looking like here now. An average of 93, 94% of the people on this poll do not believe the official account. Are you finding a similar level of skepticism in the United States?
I am finding that level of skepticism. Yes, certainly in my community where I live in the Hudson Valley in New York State, the people I talk to, the other parents that I talk to, it's rare now that I will encounter somebody who is against what I do for a living, for my and what I've been doing since 2006. I think that we are on our way to a tipping point. I think we're seeing it, and I think that this we'll see, but this British family's effort, the family of Jeff Campbell, their effort could hopefully play a major role in that tipping point going all the way and into a full-blown sort of awakening. And we are seeing it. Your poll results clearly show it. You're increasing comfort talking about it, and the response that I'm getting from people everywhere when I talk about it. And what we're seeing online today on the 11th, on this 23rd anniversary, the awareness is just exploding. So.
Yes, very clearly. I've noticed a distinct uptick in that. It took many years for the official narrative of the Kennedy assassination to run to the levels now of risible. No sentient being would any longer claim that Jack Kennedy was killed by a lone gunman in a book repository in Dallas in 1963. No one any longer believes that, though some still pretend to do so. And Donald Trump, for example, if he is elected again as president, has promised to publish the remaining redacted evidence in that case. It's not taken as long, has it, for the 9/11 official account to become as discredited as it appears to be now. Why is that, do you think?
It's a good question, George. I wasn't able to gauge, because I was born in 1982, so I wasn't able to sort of gauge the increasing awareness of the JFK assassination and the truth behind it. I think I understand that Oliver Stone's film JFK in the early 90s was a bit of a watershed moment, led to a real increase in awareness. So that's almost 30 years after. I think technology and the internet and social media and has helped a lot. The amount of documentation that there was of the event itself on 9/11. Obviously, today there would even be probably thousands more pieces of video footage and angles of the destruction of the buildings and other aspects of the event compared to 3 years ago. But so I think it's the technology that has helped a lot, and I think it's the fact that there is this sort of crumbling sense of trust in government and trust in institutions. And, it's been growing. It's been forever, you could say. It certainly took a turn or expanded with the JFK assassination. And then with 9/11, it took it to a new level. And now, for the last 23 years, we've been living in a sort of a decaying environment of trust and government, and rightly so, rightly so. I think, yeah.
I was just going to make that very point. A significant factor must be the declining credibility of the official narrative on anything. If they told you that today was Wednesday, you definitely want to check. And perhaps that began, I personally think so, me and Bob Dylan think so, on Elm Street in 1963. But other events have similarly discredited official narratives across the board. 9/11, the Iraq War and the lies that were told about it and to manufacture consent for it, the disputed elections in the United States, the suspicion that elections even are stolen and might be stolen again, the weaponization of the justice system to put electoral opponents out of the game. All these things have led to a crisis of confidence in the official state in your country and in mine, I may say. That must be a major factor, Ted.
It is a major factor for sure, perhaps the biggest factor. And along with the passage of time, it does get easier for people to sort of face the trauma of 9/11 or what was traumatic. And also you have a younger generation coming up that didn't experience it. So we have all these factors. I would like to think, and what my organization, the International Center for 9/11 Justice, is striving for, is to just bring down the entire tapestry of lies that has been surrounding us for the last, better part of a century, and to bring down what might be the heart, the engine of those lies, which is the war machine, and then the other sort of special interests and corporate interests that have also sort of contributed to and used this system to increase their power, increase wealth, et cetera. And I think we are on our way to a turning point. We are on our way to an awakening. And 9/11, I've gravitated to 9/11 because I thought it provided the best potential to have this awakening and to hit reset. Because I think we can and we all deserve a system, a world where we can trust our institutions, where our institutions are comprised of good people, and where corporate interests and so on don't have outsized influence in the way that our governments are run. I think we can get there. I'm a little optimistic, though.
All I'm asking for, I should say, is a proper inquiry, a reset. Let's go back to square one. You say a century. Let's settle for 9/11. It's not necessarily the case that you and I or any or all of the people who don't believe the official account necessarily believe an alternative account, or the same alternative account, rather. But we don't believe the official account, and therefore the official account should be reopened. There should be a new 9/11 inquiry that is not trapped by what we very widely, it seems, believe to be a false and misleading inquiry. Isn't that so?
I agree with you completely. I think that we for us to get to a point where there will be an honest government-based investigation will require an immense level of awareness and demand from the public, and sort of an ongoing scrutiny to ensure that any investigation is conducted, in a serious manner. I think we're ultimately, in some sense, the awakening might precede the actual investigation, right? To have that level of pressure and for it to be a real investigation, we're going to have to, keep raising awareness and keep investigating what actually happened that day. That part of what my organization is dedicated to, besides raising awareness, educating the public. We're not waiting around for the government to give us that investigation. It is our mission to establish fully an accurate account of what actually took place that day to the best of our ability based on the evidence that's available to us. And we're making strides towards that every day.
Well, the very best of good luck in your ongoing endeavours. Ted, thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows, and we'll look out for that English case with intense interest. Ted Walter, Executive Director of the International Centre for 9/11, and the imminent hearing in the High Court in London, where the family of Mr. Campbell, one of the deceased, a 31-year-old British citizen, killed in the North Tower on that day, who want a proper inquest into the death of their child. It's going to be a very important, maybe even landmark case indeed, so give it your attention. Give you the phone numbers again, the US and Canada, toll free, +1 844 944 3344. The UK and Ireland, free of charge, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number 0044 2039 662625. Quick break, and then it's on with the show. Stay tuned. On the line is a Rose in Texas. I was at the beginning of a song on Californication, which is a song. Rose, welcome to the show.
Fan of the show, transgender fan of the show, and I wanted to briefly address your monologue from last week on Californication, because I almost entirely agree with what you said. Trans women athletes taking medals and records, directing children at nightclubs, and even going to elementary schools themselves, not to mention hormone blockers for children as well. The attack on freedom of speech, not only against conservatives, but anyone who doesn't fall in line with the agenda, rainbow flags on NATO military aircraft, which is certainly doing more to cultivate anti-queer sentiment around the world than there already is. All of that makes me sick. So because I don't believe in incest, bestiality, necrophilia, and pedophilia, I'm basically culturally right-wing by today's standards, even though less than 5 years ago, I'd still be left-wing. So in regards to you and everyone else watching who thinks of me and people like me as the villains right now, you should know that I support the most traditional Muslim, Jewish, Abrahamic believers to be as homophobic and transphobic as they want, because guess what? That's freedom of religion, which is a value we claim to have in the West. Now, my religion, I suppose, is I believe I'm a woman, but guess what? Not everyone has to convert to my religion. Otherwise, we basically have a theocracy, only this theocracy is for the ever-evolving LGBTQIA supercalifragilisticexpialidocious club. So that's all I wanted to get out of my system. Thank you.
Well, Rose, if I could put your call in a glass bottle and ship it around the world, I promise you that I would do so. Crystal clear, beautifully expressed, and I wish you every happiness in life. It is exactly what people who are transgender should be saying. And if they were, they would disappoint the liberal zealots who want to use them as a battering ram against the traditional family values of the rest of us. Beautifully expressed, Rose. I'll never forget it.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
So get voting on the poll. Do you believe the official account of 9/11? Yes or no? It doesn't mean you necessarily agree on any alternative explanation of what happened that day. But do you believe the official account of 9/11? Yes or no? I'm definitely in the no camp, as are the vast majority of respondents so far. And the numbers on this poll are racking up quickly. Let's take some comments on 9/11 so far tonight. Sean Atwood says, check out the 9/11 insider option trading on the airlines, George. I will do, Sean. Collie Bean says, mad respect, George. I don't buy the official narrative, and it also took me a while to come around. And Hans Rees says, thanks, George, for your persistence. Their lies need to be exposed to keep safe. Let's take a call from New York. Matthew in New York on 9/11. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hey, George. Nice to hear you. Yeah, 9/11, boy. I'm glad you're looking into it more. You got a great voice to let everyone know the truth. And I just left my job in Manhattan. 50 feet away from my job is the busiest firehouse in New York. They had a big ceremony today, a mass across the street at St. Francis. A few days ago, we had our annual parade for Father Michael Judge, grand man, who lost his life, also the fire department chaplain. I want to scream, hey, find out the truth. But, everyone's mourning. I'm mourning. We lost a lot of people over there. But you were saying about the Pentagon, obviously that was a cruise missile. If you look into all the proof that's out there, you could talk for months on all the
I know. That's the dilemma, yeah. We could fill 10 shows with this case and still not get to the full breadth of the emerging evidence or the emerging questions over what we were told was the evidence.
Oh, without a doubt. But I try to cut it, make it simple, because you can talk about it forever. But I try to tell people about the Shanksville crash, the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Yeah. The Flight 73, I think it was, where they supposedly fought back. Now, I tell everyone, look at every single picture since the dawn of aviation, of every plane crash ever, no matter how devastating. My cousin was on Flight 103, Pan Am, that was 30,000 feet up in the air. You always have plane parts. You always have bodies. No matter what the crash is. This is the first crash site in history. No bodies, no plane parts. Just a simple thing like that is just utterly obvious, and then you can take it from there.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not just the question. If I stick to the Pentagon for a minute, I don't know so much about the other one. But if I stick to the Pentagon, it's not just that. It is self-evidently not a commercial airliner that is going through the front door just 10 or 12 feet tall into the Pentagon. It's so obviously not an airliner, it begs two questions. What was it and who fired it and why? And the second question, what actually then happened to the airliner that is alleged to have gone into the front of the Pentagon and all the people that were on it?
Well, unfortunately, I hate to say it, I believe the Pennsylvania flight and the other flight, I think they were taken to a hangar and disposed of. And we, of course, would never put it past the powers that may be.
Well, no, they were planning. In Operation Northwoods, they planned to fly an airplane into public buildings in America and blame it on Fidel Castro. I've personally talked to Fidel Castro about that. So there's let's start from the premise that there is nothing that you would say was beneath the people who rule our countries. The only barrier to belief for me was not that I didn't think George Bush and co. were bad enough to have done something like this, but that they were not stupid enough, although he was pretty stupid, that they were not stupid enough to think you could get away with a crime of that magnitude. Not that they were morally incapable of doing it. So I agree with you. My premise is that there is nothing beyond them that they would not have considered doing for moral reasons. The only questions in my mind were always practical. So many people would have to know. Such a conspiracy would have to be so large. Inevitably, things would leak out. But they are now beginning to leak out. The footage I've been watching about the Pentagon had to be screwed out by the courts from the single camera at the Pentagon, for God's sake. A single camera in the car park. But now that we've got the footage, it is self-evidently not an airplane that goes through the front door of the Pentagon. I think that Ted Walter was right, that actually we're approaching a tipping point on all this. What do you say, Matthew?
They did get away with it. And I don't think anything is going to come to fruition with it. Just like JFK, we know what happened there. And even if the truth comes out, I don't think it's going to come out. The problem here, and being a New Yorker, and like I said, I come from a firefighter family. We were touched hard with it, but so many people, they even listen to me or listen to what they've learned, and they believe it was a conspiracy, but I think they're just too afraid to face the truth. They're too afraid to realize that the narrative they were given was a lie. How could my country do this to me? And they'd rather believe the lie than to face the truth that they believe is lurking there.
Great call, Matthew, in New York. Thanks for making it. Walter is in Blackpool, again on 9/11. Go ahead, Walter.
Yes, well, thanks very much for having me, George. I very much agree with your previous guest, as one Walter to another. Yes. Right. Now, first of all, there are a few things that the public don't know about. Now, these are from official sources. First of all, the FBI removed Osama bin Laden from the list of its 10 most wanted men within a few years of 9/11. When they were asked about this, they said it was because they had no hard evidence to make bin Laden responsible for 9/11. Now, secondly, from our own parliament, UK parliament, a government report was submitted to the UK parliament, again saying they had no hard evidence against bin Laden. Now, thirdly, of course, we've always had this so-called admission of bin Laden of his own guilt. Well, that isn't so. Within a few days of 9/11, Osama bin Laden actually denied that he had any involvement in 9/11. And fourthly, look, let's just imagine, for the sake of argument, without prejudice, as the lawyers say, that bin Laden was responsible. Now, the International Court of Justice in the Nicaragua case in 1986 said that no armed action against the country is justified unless the action complained of was perpetrated on the direct instructions of the government of the country in question. Now, not even the most bloodthirsty warmonger, not even Blair or Bush, has ever claimed that bin Laden was acting on the direct instructions of the Afghan government.
Yeah, it's the rules-based international order, Walter in Blackpool. Great call. Now, on the podcast, I keep telling you, last Wednesday I announced that we'd gone through the 1 million barrier, 1 million people listening to our podcast. And it's just charted in Brazil for the very first time. It's in the top 5 in Romania, the top 10 in Pakistan, and it is number 2 in Kuwait. A big welcome to all my friends in Kuwait. Now, you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Please do that. Scan that, and you'll get the quintessential mother of all talk shows on the podcast tomorrow. Let's stay in New York and talk with our legend Erobos on 9/11. Erobos, welcome.
Salubrious late evening to you, Mr. G, your family, the MOATS staff, all of the audience. I was just speaking with the lady here, Jai, and I was telling her that my first encounters with you was on this issue of 9/11 when you used to have the program with WBAI years ago, and you have come a ways since then, right? Because I remember you used to be, and you mentioned it here. You used to be like, "How is it possible that all of these people don't know? This is ridiculous. I don't believe it." But you've come quite a way since then, and well,
Erobos, as Groucho Marx said, when the facts change, so do my opinions. How about you?
Yes.
Go ahead, Erobos.
Yes, and I would state that getting to know more about the permanent state, aka the deep state.
Yeah.
It's rife with individuals with self-interest. And thinking back in history, how was it able, a continent like Africa or India or South America, how is it, what would be like the Mayan and all these other kingdoms? I'm not going to go through the list, but how is it a small group of European traders could penetrate these continents, tear them inside out, steal trillions in resources? It's because they already had people there, whether they were called tribes, nations, families, that it was easy to get involved with these people and cater to their self-interest and give them beads and guns and whatever it is you got to give them, and they just took the same avarice that they always had and the same grievances that were always had and skillfully manipulate these people. And now you have a whole continent in chains, because it's the same self-interest that you find in people today. So I would sort of like reinforce the argument I had back then, that you're always going to find, even right now in Rochdale, a lot of the people, I guess when the investigation comes through that you're conducting, but a lot of these people who voted, they didn't necessarily vote because they hated you or the Workers' Party, but they voted because of their own self-interest. And since they put $100 million AIPAC to defeat politicians here, many of whom, let's be honest, were easy to defeat. In your case, people, they probably took, and I'm not saying that as a fact, but knowing people in self-interest psychology, they took the money in the brown bag, right? They took the check. They took the prestige. Screw the community. And as long as we always have these people, catastrophes, large and small, will happen. So, but I'm glad that we're here many years later and sort of coming full circle. And I'm glad that you're with us on this.
Thank you, Erebos. Just on that point, our dossier of allegations about the conduct of the parliamentary election in Rochdale on the 4th of July was submitted this day to Greater Manchester Police, and I can make no further comment about it, and we trust that the police will do their duty. Thanks, Erebos, legend in New York. Let's take some comments. Tommy Two Gloves says, a retired Fire Department of New York survivor here, George. I lost all the men on Rescue 3, Big Blue, from the Bronx. A prayer for my brother, fireman and friend, firefighter Thomas Gambino. R.I.P. Tommy. Amen to that, Tommy Two Gloves. QVerti281 says JFK wanted AIPAC to register as a foreign lobby right before it happened. And Mike Grocock says what was really odd was that there was no sign of any plane parts at the Pentagon. On the line from Canada, from Ottawa, is Paul, but also on 9/11. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks for having me again, George. I would just like to point out that I express my deep sympathies for everybody who died on 9/11. Amen. And I would also like to say I forgive all people, including yourself, because it would be a very hard thing not to believe the story if you didn't know what was going on. So, well, I knew the moment it went down, that can't happen. And why? Well, I was lucky enough to see a documentary done by the CBC, and it was about how they were built. And CBC did it because it's a very Canadian content. The biggest steel workers in North America, there's two of them, Mohawks and what they call the Fish. And the Fish are Newfoundlanders. And so I'm half Newfoundlander, and I got a lot of Mohawk friends, so I was really interested in this. And they had kind of a race of how they could build it. And as they're talking, there's like 3 generations on each one, grandfather, father, son. So they were really proud of what they did. And as they're building it, you see the footage of them building it, and then they're interviewing them. And they're like, there's no way these things can come down. Now, okay, you say, well, they're the builders. Well, then they also had the architect who actually built it. And he said, this is meant to hit and take not one, but multiple airliners, not Cessnas, airliners. Exactly what happened. One hit. So when I was watching it with my lady, I said, she was very concerned. And I said, oh, don't worry. It's almost like they're vacuum packed each. I don't know how else to describe it, but the people at the top could be saved. They shouldn't have died. And I said, there's no way they can come down. It's impossible. And then they came down. Now I look like a fool. But I have not been able to find this documentary because I would show it I would go like, why is this not being put out there? You tell me, George.
Very, very interesting. Oh, I wish I could tell you, Paul, but I can't. And it's an intriguing postscript to this discussion, I must say. Do you believe the official account of 9/11? That's our poll. 22,754 have voted, and overwhelmingly, people do not believe the official account of 9/11. That, at least, is a fact. Right after this break, it's a very important woman indeed, Sarah Wilkinson, about whom much has been said by me, by us, by many around the world over the last couple of weeks. Activist and campaigner for Palestine since many years, and a reporter for MENA Uncensored, Middle East, North Africa Uncensored. She's coming up right after this. You won't want to miss it. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Sarah Wilkinson, the indefatigable campaigner for Palestine, thought that perhaps she'd met her match in the form of 12 police officers who raided her house, some of them wearing balaclavas, like terrorists. They broke her mother's urn that contained her ashes. They removed her passport. They removed her money. They arrested her and then imposed bail conditions, which were rightly the cause of revulsion all over the world. She became the first person in 2024 to be told she could never use a telephone or never use a computer again. It was a monstrous overreach by the original court, and this week these bail conditions have been lifted. And so Sarah Wilkinson is finally free, and boy, are we pleased to see her on the mother of all talk shows this evening. Sarah, there will be a big round of applause, literally, never mind metaphorically, all round the world, our global audience, to see you looking hale and hearty, and of course, as determined as ever. Anyone who thought they could break your spirit by banning you from using the telephone was a fool indeed. But in your own words, for the audience, particularly outside of social media, that hasn't followed it quite as closely, tell us what happened to you.
Hello, George. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. It is a pleasure to be on. So at about 7:10, there's a loud banging on the door. And I looked out of the window and the whole street is closed off. Various police vehicles from Black Marias to ordinary police cars. Lots of plainclothes. People at the door, they're going to break the door down. And so I kind of thought, well, it's pointless having the door broken down. That there's nothing you can do about this. I'm going to open the door. This is clearly an arrest. As soon as I opened the door, it was like I was sort of thrust backwards. My son was pushed against the wall, and these plainclothes counter-terrorism unit guerrillas stormed in and sort of frog marched me up the stairs. Didn't give me a time to get dressed or take any meds for my Crohn's. Didn't give me any time to do anything. I still had my dressing gown on and bare feet, and I was handcuffed so tightly that my wrists were cut. By the time we reached the station, I had sort of bloody cuts. It looked like I'd tried to sort of slash my wrists. But we didn't drive to Shrewsbury. So there was a point in this arrest where I thought, oh God, these aren't police. We're going the wrong way. So there was an element of terror in the fact that we drove probably about 30 miles the wrong way. And I did think in the back of this van, well, we weren't really able to ask to see the warrant. They wouldn't let us. They didn't really let us see any identification. So there was a point that I thought that this is an execution. So that I was quite relieved actually to see the police station eventually, sort of an hour and a half later than we should have done. And then during the time, I was held for about 12 hours, but during that time I was away, they absolutely ransacked the house. They threw my son out of the house. They wanted to search it without anybody here. They upturned my mother's ashes, which literally went everywhere. We haven't been able to get the remains back into the urn. We're missing a quarter of her remains, which was one of the most horrific things I've ever done, to actually have to get a dustpan and brush for my mother's remains because I couldn't do it any other way. But they stole money. They literally looted money, and they didn't list these items. So when you seize items, they have to be listed under police protocol. My passport was missing. The money inside my passport was missing. Clothes are missing. Flags are missing. There's a lot of items, none of which are listed. And of course, they took all the electronic devices, my phones. Obviously, I didn't have time to turn my phone off, so I was kind of concerned about this. It just all happened so quickly. But the arrest was pretty brutal, really. They considering my age, these are sort of men in their mid-30s and mid-40s, and I'm sort of 61, and I'm sure if I had grey hair and a walking stick, they might have treated me a little bit differently. But I literally was thrown in the back of this van with handcuffs that made my hands bleed, and I lost the circulation in my fingers, and no medication. So when I got to the station, I couldn't eat. They were threatening to keep me for 42 hours minimum, possibly a week. And I thought, well, with no medication, I can't eat. I can't really drink. So I was thinking, well, I'm not going to survive the week. And then they produced this medical so-called doctor who I did question her qualifications, and I question this in truth. I will question this. I'll take this up, I think, is that she didn't know how to spell Crohn's. She didn't even know how to get a pill out of a packet. And when I was being released, they finally gave me some meds, which was too late in the day, obviously. She gave me the wrong ones. And so for somebody who claims to be a doctor, it's very questionable. But the brutality, I think, the remarks, the interrogation was extraordinarily racist. Obviously, you have to no comment, but there was a point where I had to break the no comment and say, I'm sorry, but this line of questioning is extraordinarily racist. It didn't feel like British police questioning. We're a multicultural society. So to ask questions like, why do you think Palestinians are better than us? Why do you think they're better than white people? Why aren't white people as good as Palestinians? For me, felt like non-British questioning. And I wanted it recorded on the tape in case it did go to court, that this line of questioning is not acceptable. It's bigoted, it's racist, it's discriminatory, and actually it's quite to kind of sort of compare people for their color or their ethnicity. That didn't feel like British questioning. So there were a lot of things where the police broke protocol. They've also changed the times of the actual arrest and the house raid. They put it down as 10:30. Well, I was clearly arrested at 7:30, and that's well known. That's known by my solicitor. But they wrote down 10:30. They said they left at 2. They didn't leave till after 5 o'clock. So they've actually signed this. So I don't think that this is going to go to court because there are so many errors, so many things that I think a judge would throw out or would heavily question. I actually don't think they ever intended this to go to court. This was about terrorizing not just me as a civilian in my own home. This was terrorizing the entire top end of town. They closed the road off. People thought it was a kind of gun raid with these balaclavaed thugs running around the street, barging their way into the house. Some residents said, well, we didn't know whether we were all going to get shot at and should we duck or should we run away? So they terrorized everyone, really. And obviously myself and my son, I think we were both very badly treated for the whole duration of the whole arrest. Once CID and the terror squad had left, I don't think Shrewsbury police knew why I was there. They didn't really seem to understand. And they said, well, we're going to have to release you. This isn't a very big station. We're not going to be keeping you for the week. We are going to release you. So, I think the whole thing, none of it felt right. I think it was too violent. I think it just didn't follow police protocol. And the act of trying to scare us as much as possible, you're going to go to jail for 5 years. It could be 15 years. It might be 5 years. You'll have to disclose the phone numbers of Palestinian people We're working with a British doctor on the ground trying to provide clean water and dig water wells. They wanted his name. They wanted his location. They wanted his phone number. They wanted everything. They wanted journalists, even the names of journalists that I don't actually work with, but I recognize their names. So they wanted to know the location of Palestinians by being able to make a phone call to them and then use the surveillance to track them. This was terrifying because it was a matter of life and death that I didn't give away any information. But then I was told, well, if you don't give out your passcodes and your PIN numbers and you don't give us these numbers, then it's instantly 5 years in jail. So, I obviously was not going to give anything away. And I submitted myself to thinking I'm going to jail for 5 years here, minimum. I'm not giving the location of anyone away. This is a genocide. They are looking to target particular Palestinians, particularly journalists, doctors, and people that we know, our contacts, close contacts, friends. I had to be really careful. I had very, very good solicitors. So, the bail conditions, there were 7 of them, and it was no phone. So when you live in an area like this, you need to be able, we all have wood burners, so the chances of having a chimney fire are quite great. I have no way of ringing 999 for a fire engine, no way to ring an ambulance, no way of contacting my grandkids on the first day of school. Couldn't even use my TV because that actually is a smart TV. So technically it uses the internet. Couldn't use anyone else's electronic device. I mean, it goes on. I couldn't use camera, couldn't photograph the devastation. And they said, and if you do use an electronic device of any sort whatsoever or try to buy a new phone, we will know because we're monitoring you. So, it was, I couldn't even shop, no travel documents. So that originally was train tickets and bus tickets, which they did retract by the time I was released, but no travel documents as in a passport, which they denied that they had seized. So I had to surrender my passport in 7 days, or I faced 5 years in jail once again, which could turn out to be 15. But they had taken my passport, but I couldn't prove it. So,
well, look, if I had any hair, it would be standing on end at what you have just told us. And there are so many questions that arise from it, some big, some small. What conceivable interest would it be to the police in Shrewsbury what the location of a Palestinian journalist in Gaza was? How is that a matter for British law enforcement? I'm sure they didn't explain that to you, but if they did, you'll no doubt correct me. But going back to the big picture, all of this was over what? Tweets? Facebook posts? What?
But it was a year's worth of, originally what they said, it was a year's worth of tweets from the, I think the first one was from the 10th of October right up to about the 29th of August. And I thought, oh my God, that's about 11,000 tweets. So I did think, oh, crikey. I bet one of those tweets, you know, maybe I lost my temper or I was angry what was happening in Gaza. Possibility of 11,000 tweets having one item wrong. But in the end, they've narrowed that down to about 500. And then even during this sort of 3-hour interrogation, there wasn't time to go through 500. So they narrowed that down to 300. And then they questioned me on about 11 tweets, which, I mean, there's a whole booklet of tweets, but they're all journalistic. I've got a press pass. I've got an international press pass. So, and I tend to quote the journalists. So I was kind of confident that, you know, everything was going to be fine with the tweets. I actually think that that was an excuse. I think you're right. What you say, what interest did Shrewsbury? Well, Shrewsbury police didn't have any. I think the people who interrogated me, there was a slight Mossad Shin Bet type feel to it. The line of questioning, the statement about why are Palestinians better than white people, that's going to stick with me for a long time, because I don't think British police in this multicultural society, no matter how bad police can be, would say that and would be heard to say it in court, because obviously this is all being taped. So it was at that point I thought, this isn't going to court. There's no way that question will be in court and a judge will go, that's an okay question. That just wasn't an okay question. So I kind of started to realize this isn't for court. This is purely for terror. This is purely to scare me into silence, to shut me up, or to make me go off and do something else and not focus on this Israeli genocide. It's to stop me informing people, like I have been doing for, I don't know, 15 years or whatever, on X, of what is happening on the ground in Gaza. This is to terrify me, but it's also hoping then that I might maybe inform the people on the ground in Gaza. I've been asked about you. They've given me your names. You know, they wanted to know everything about where they were located, how could they reach them, and they can reach them through my phone. So there's a disclosure thing. I always forget the name. I think it's called a RESHA disclosure, where if you don't give your PIN numbers out, it is this instant 5-year jail. Mm-hmm. So you're left with that. Very quickly, I had to sort of, all right, I'm not going to see my grandchildren again for 5 years at least. They'll be teenagers when I get out. And I'm probably not going to see my ex-husband again because he's ill. And I don't think he's going to survive 5 years. So, yeah, it was horrific, but it didn't feel like British police questioning. And well, it was very, very long.
The fact they didn't know the way to the Shrewsbury Nick would certainly tell you they weren't local, right?
Well, I don't know whether that was done deliberately to actually scare me more. I think they did. They had a sat-nav. I kept seeing Shrewsbury left, Shrewsbury. I mean, we kept passing the Shrewsbury signs. I thought, oh my God, we're not going to Shrewsbury. And, you know, it's that point you realize, did you actually, how do you, when you're being arrested, how do you actually ask if police are authentic? They've slapped handcuffs on you. They're dragging you downstairs. They're dragging you into the back of the van. You can't really sort of say, oh, who are you? They're not going to reply. there was nobody really filming this. I didn't know if they had cameras on. I mean, most were plain clothes. So it was at the point when we were driving the wrong way. Yeah, I just thought, oh, this is an execution. I'm being taken to, I mean, this is a rural area. I'm being taken somewhere where they're just going to put a gun to my head, and that's the end of me. So actually, that is what I started believing, because it just didn't. Yeah, if you ring 999, you would like to think that the police know where they're going around here. And also, I'm nearer Shrewsbury, obviously going the opposite direction. We added another hour onto the journey. So it's an hour of terror. And I think that was done to break me down, somehow make me so terrified that by the time we reach the police station, I'm so relieved that I spill everything and I say everything. But, you know, I've been arrested 26 times now, and that isn't going to work. But I mean, it rattled me, because I realized we haven't really asked for any ID. We don't really know, are these police? And I did question that. So yeah, I was so relieved. This is the first time I've been relieved to see the police station, the sign.
To see the inside of a police station. Now, you are a completely non-violent peace and justice activist. They're going to find it difficult in all the circumstances, as you've described them, to take this to trial. What's your current legal position? Are you on bail? How did they justify the bail conditions and the dropping of them? What is likely to happen next, and when?
Okay. There's a few questions there. They didn't justify the bail conditions, but my Kelly's solicitors from Brighton, who are incredible, and I have to say, you know, they worked really, really hard trying to express how inhuman it is to leave somebody in an area like this without any phone, without any contact, without any TV, without any ability to even buy food or even order a taxi. Actually, we don't really have taxis here, but, you know, I couldn't. I think my big thing was, oh God, you know, if I need an ambulance or I'm ill, or somebody else needs an ambulance, I can't ring. I need my phone. So they didn't really justify it. But I think Shrewsbury police were the ones who dropped these 6 conditions out of the 7. There's still one thing that I can't do, but they allow me to use social media, providing I don't do that one thing. And so literally all the bail conditions just fizzled because they are inhuman. I did have, look, you know, you guys supported me hugely, and I need to thank everybody who wrote to their MPs on my behalf. I've got to thank you, George, because, you know, you put it out there and you have a large following, and I think people were shocked. And Crispin Flintoff brought me a kitchen's worth of food. And he also raised the money to replace the cash that was looted. The support has been incredible. But I think for Shrewsbury police, it was an utter nightmare. They just, you know, they didn't want this attention. They didn't want to be made out to be the sort of guerrillas that they were.
The Gestapo.
It's like the Stasi, you know, this thing where we're watching you. I was followed the other day. I went to get a new phone. And, you know, I know when I'm being followed. I'm savvy enough to recognize that this guy in this particular pair of trousers has been getting on and off the train. Literally, every time I got off the train to see if he got off the train, and he did. And I got back on, and he got back on. I got off. At the next station, he got off. And so very quickly, all right, I'm already followed. So I managed to give him the slip. But, you know, this following, this monitoring, it is very, very Stasi-like. You know, like it's an invasion of my privacy. It's an invasion of civilian life and being able to exist out here. There are very long public transport journeys involved in going anywhere. So, you know, following me is quite difficult because you can see you're being followed all the way, you know. But yeah, I managed to give him the slip, and I didn't see him again. But yeah, you know, why are you now following me? Because you've dropped the bail. I do have to return in November to hand myself in. I am going to apply for my passport back because that was actually part of the bail condition. So now Shrewsbury police have confessed to actually having taken it, and I don't have to surrender it. I can now apply for it back. I won't get any of my devices back, and if they are, they'll be tracked or bugged, or they'll be damaged or broken, which normally happens. I doubt I'll get them back. So I've had to replace everything or start replacing everything. So they took about £7,000 worth of equipment, and they took other people's equipment as well, not just mine, demanding the passcodes and PIN numbers for computers that I don't even own, and threatening me with 5 years in jail for not giving out PIN numbers to computers I've never had in this house. So there were things added to the list, which felt like entrapment. Are they going to add things onto this computer and then say, well, here you are, here's you, and here's a phone call list, and here's photographs you shouldn't have on your laptop. But it wasn't my laptop. And no, and we can't, we don't know whose it was. We think that maybe it was just added sort of menacingly. And I did think, oh, they're going to put things on this laptop. And my son, of course, signed it off, because how does he know what I have and what I don't have? So this poor lad sort of signed it off, and he sort of thought, oh, crikey, I've said that you own this HP laptop, but yeah, I've never owned an HP laptop. So yeah, we did think there's a lot of entrapment in a lot of these things that happened. You know, surrendering the passport, HP laptop doesn't belong to me. You know, we thought we may be bugged, so we've had a bug sweep. So we had a company come round, and they spent about 5 hours x-raying the whole house. They haven't bugged me. So here's another question. Was raiding my house worth it? Do you really think that I am a terrorist if you're not going to even bother bugging me? So the fact that they release you on bail, they say, go back home, they clearly don't think that you're any threat. So what was this all about? The destruction of my mother's ashes. Why? Why would, I mean, it's desecration. And we've seen this from the Israelis, have we not? The desecration of human remains. There was a lot of things that were similar. I'm not in any way saying that what I experienced is anything compared to what the Palestinians have been through, but there were a lot of similar sort of things. What was the point of it? If you really don't think I'm a threat, you've let me go. I can now have my passport back, so technically I can travel. You can't possibly think that I'm a threat. So why go through all this? Why not just ask me to surrender myself to the police station? And I think the same thing happened with Richie Medhurst, where, you know, he was arrested on the plane, and he said, well, why didn't they just wait until I got to passport control? It's about display. It's like peacocking, that we can come into anyone's home, let everybody see how terrifying we are, and none of you will want to raise a Palestinian flag again or talk about Palestine, because this is what will happen to you. And I think that was the motive, rather than getting me in court, because I haven't lost a court case yet. So I think that I could win this court case based on the fact that they botched so many things up. So,
well, nobody watching this interview will be in any doubt at all about that. I could speak to you all night, but alas, we'll have to leave it there. You are our Joan of Arc, Sarah Wilkinson, activist and campaigner for Palestine. May God preserve you.
Thank you for your support, George.
No, it's my duty. It's my privilege, my honour to be your supporter. Comments on Sarah. Raphael Angel says, courage has a face and a name. Sarah Wilkinson. Nicola Curtin says, this is the behaviour of terrorists that the British state complain about when this happens in other countries. Plain Vanilla says, you know you're doing the right thing when they treat you like this. Quick break, and then about last night's debate, it's the one and only Caleb Mopan, journalist, speaker, and political analyst. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss it.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They have nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting. The victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Just before Caleb Mopan, let's take a quick call from a man who's been investigating the 9/11 attacks. John in Fife. John, what's on your mind?
Hello, George. Great show. And Sarah was terrific. Thanks for giving it an outline.
Wow.
It's simply this. Yeah, it's simply this. I used to work in America. I worked for the Washington Post. And at the time that Bush Jr. was inaugurated in 2001, an old friend of mine told me that there was going to be a war in the Middle East. And I said, how do you know? And she said, because my doctor is a medical reservist and he's been told to be on standby to be posted to the Middle East once an event has taken place to promote it. So when 9/11 happened, I thought, could this be the event? Could this, as several people have said, be the Pearl Harbor event that persuades Americans reluctant to fight in wars overseas after Vietnam could actually do it? And I started digging away with help from American friends and other sources too. And my plan was, because there's an election due in June 2001, to use the money I'd recently obtained in a libel action from Rupert Murdoch to stand as a candidate in a constituency. And if I could second source what I'd been told by my friend in DC, then I could use that platform, as you do and other people have, to say, there's a war coming. I couldn't second source it in time. Of course, we now know that this war had been prepared long before, even before George Bush was inaugurated. And of course, 9/11 happened 9 months after he went into the White House. And the second thing to say briefly, because you have a lot to get through with this program, is there's a definite turning of the tide on this issue, in part born, I think, as you said, and Ted Walter, who's excellent on this, the general skepticism that people have in official versions of almost anything these days. Yeah. And I think it's opening up. And I look online, I've been writing about this for 20 years on my website, forsando.com, and with very little interest. And suddenly, on Twitter, in the last 24 hours, the whole thing has come alive. And now you're doing this, other people are picking up. The Matt Campbell case, I know Matt, he's coming up in the case on Friday. That's a very, very important case. And the whole thing has been deliberately set up to give a justification for more wars, essentially. The explanation of what happened is complex, and I'm not one who's got a simple explanation. It's far too complex for that. But what most of us agree on is that what we were told, certainly in the official investigation, so-called, is absolutely untrue. And we've now got architects and engineers with their great website who are saying, as engineers, we cannot stand by this untruth. We need to, they're trying to get the Senate and Congress to approve legislation to ensure that government documents in future are true, because they found so many documents by government following 9/11 are absolutely, basically, and obviously untrue. So that's just to thank you for that, for raising the issue.
John, give us that website address again. I, for one, want to go to it.
Yeah, it's called Fourth Zando. I live by the Fourth in Fife. So it's FORTH and then Zando, ZANDO.com, fourthzando.com. And the last piece I wrote on it was called Suddenly in September, ? And there'll be more in future. Okay?
There'll be a few visits to the site this evening, John, I can assure you. Thanks very much indeed for that insight. Now, Caleb Mopen is an old friend of mine, colleague of mine, and comrade of mine. He's a journalist, speaker, political analyst, and I just know that if I was up in the middle of the night watching that debate, he must have been also. Caleb, I gave my analysis at the beginning. In case you didn't hear it, I recap that Donald Trump bombed and Kamala Harris soared, but she did have quite a bit of wind beneath her wings provided by the hosts. And nothing's ever as good or as bad as it first appears. And so it may be that my feeling last night about the outcome will begin to be chipped away at over subsequent days. What's your take on the debate?
Well, I think Trump held his own pretty well in what turned out to be a 3-against-1 fight. It wasn't just a debate against Kamala Harris. It was, as you noted, a debate with the moderators as well, who stepped in to contend things that he was saying, but never once corrected or bothered to interfere when Kamala Harris went forward with her false statements. I will say the debate was, in a lot of ways, just a display of how bad politics in the United States has gotten. But Kamala Harris, she displayed her plasticity and her fakeness very well with the fake hand gestures that were clearly very rehearsed, that she'd gone over with her team. At one point, she, in her closing, she started saying, "We won't go back." And it was supposed to be a profound, epic moment, like she was in the climax of a movie. And everyone was just looking on as if, like, are you really, seriously, like, give us a break? And the fact that Kamala Harris is very, very manufactured and not genuine really, really came across. And the fact that the establishment is solidly on her side. This wasn't a fair debate by any means. I think Donald Trump held his own pretty well, in a hostile environment. So I don't think he's damaged by this debate at all.
What Tony Blair might once have said, once you can fake the sincerity, the rest is easy. She did fake the sincerity quite well, I thought. Almost Blair-like. It's almost as if Blair had been coaching her. Maybe he did. What's the polling evidence of how the whole thing went down? Is there any polls out yet?
Well, it's neck and neck, but the New York Times, ABC, they're predicting a victory for Trump, but there are also polls predicting a victory for Kamala Harris. I will say there were a couple moments where you just have to see the entire debate as a display of how bizarre and bad American politics has gotten. For example, at one point, Donald Trump tried to call out the Biden-Harris administration by saying that he had blocked the Nord Stream pipeline and they had allowed it to go through. Well, that's an interesting thing to brag about, because I think at this point everyone knows that Joe Biden blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. So if there's one area where I will give Joe Biden credit, it's being against the Nord Stream pipeline. He blew it up. So he won that one. You have to give him that one. So that was kind of a weird thing for Donald Trump to try and claim an edge on. The other thing that was bizarre is at one point Kamala Harris accused Donald Trump of selling computer chips to China so they could build up their military. Well, anyone who knows anything about the computer chip debate knows that that's what the United States wants. They're trying to prevent China from making their own chips. That is what the whole issue is. China would like to make their own computer chips in China, and the U.S. Congress and all kinds of sanctions and everything's being done to make sure they have to buy their chips from the United States. So that was just a weird thing for Kamala to accuse him of. In a lot of ways, the debate was just kind of a display of political ignorance, with the prejudices of various sides being played on. Kamala Harris trying to out-Trump Trump and opposing China and talking about fentanyl. Trump trying to, appeal to different things that Kamala Harris has invoked to. It was a kind of a sad state of affairs. The one thing that did come across is that nowadays everyone kind of lives in their own social media internet bubble, and that there was a lot of code words and buzz phrases being used that appeal to certain people that have their own little corner of the internet. And that's going to be something that politicians in our time are going to increasingly have to deal with. We don't have common points of reference like we once did.
The worst part for me, the saddest part for me, was when they literally vied with each other in a Dutch auction as to who loved Israel the most, who would support the crimes of Israel to the maximum degree. Who won that particular contest?
Well, that's a good question. Kamala Harris, if she's going to win the election, she will need the votes of lots of Muslims in Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Illinois. And the way she talked last night, I don't know how she expects them to vote for her, because she repeated the Israeli line about rape and about terrorism and Israel defending itself. And then she said, she'll make a ceasefire. Well, she's already in the White House. She's in the executive branch. She's the vice president. And everyone knows Joe Biden isn't exactly at the top of his game steering the ship. So if she was going to create a ceasefire, why doesn't she do it right now? And that's what Donald Trump really hit her hard in his closing remarks. He said, why don't you just do it? You're in office at this point. Why don't you just do it? And that was an epic line, I think, that really hammered home. The other thing is that Donald Trump, he repeatedly talked about the United States being a nation in decline, our country's being sold down the tubes, and Americans just know in their bones that's true. You go to any corner of this country, you go to the South, you go to the Midwest, you go to New England, people know that the country is falling apart and it is in decline. And for Kamala Harris to kind of poo-poo those sentiments and just try to pretend that that's not the case, or even call out Trump for saying that, as she did in her speech accepting the Democrat nomination, saying that Donald Trump is being negative and he's so negative about our country. Well, Americans feel quite negative right now. This economy isn't so good for working families. So I think Trump had the upper edge on those sentiments. I mean, Americans agree with him about the state of affairs in the country economically.
Well, we'll keep it under review, as you will. I hope you'll be back soon to keep us up to date on the campaign. Caleb Mopan, journalist, speaker, and as you've just seen, political analyst supreme. Thanks for joining us. Running out of time, so let me press on. Raphael is in Dover, in England, on 9/11. Go ahead, Raphael.
Hello, George. Nice to talk to you after so many times of trying.
Okay.
This is a fantastic show. What I was going to mention about the 9/11, about a year ago, I happened to see a documentary on television, I think it was on YouTube, done by one of the top specialists in the structural engineer from Canada. And he was comparing his finding together with what the engineers 9/11 had found, and they were totally different. And his conclusion was that definitely that kind of building would have never come down with just one or two plane hitting. The building came down from underneath. It was the foundation were undermined from underneath, and in fact, fire brigade were not allowed to go down to the foundation and below the lift, because that's where the charges were, basically. But the whole point is this was all premeditated. I mean, America has got a list of the country they have to war with, which you know, and a lot of the people who knows and follow these things know. Zabriskie did a very fabulous job, and one by one, what he listed have been achieved. Israel has got the whole American empire in their hands, and they had to eliminate all the enemy of Israel. and of course Saddam Hussein was one of them. Saddam made some big stupid mistakes, like many other people, and Gaddafi as well, who decided to abandon the dollar and go for gold. So they had to be eliminated. This is all part of the same big plan. Nothing new there. They can try to cover it up, but as you say, the lies always eventually get recognized. They got short leg, we say in Italy.
Yeah, very good. I mean, the reality is, once you know somebody is a liar, you will assess every statement that they subsequently make as potentially, at least, another lie. And everything since 9/11 has led the public in all countries ineluctably to the conclusion that the empire is a tower of lies, and that having been exposed as a tower of lies, one is inevitably going to go back through previous events before one knew that it was all a tower of lies to discern when the lies began. And Ted Walter believes we need to go back the best part of a century, which was an intriguing statement indeed. Raphael in Dover, thank you for joining us. My good wife joins me in the studio. Gayatri, what's rattling?
Do you believe the official account of 9/11?
No.
No. And again, it's straight.
Seems like virtually nobody does.
Nobody. Straightforward poll, overwhelming numbers saying exactly what you just said. David Driver says, to believe the official account, the laws of science would have to be suspended for the day. And Gordon Lamont says, let me see, when was the last time my government told me the truth about anything of consequence? Never. Never. Marajani says, Pentagon employs Hollywood and this is how you got 9/11. Lots of people saying that that's how the plane effect was put into play. Doc Jazz, our friend, says, no rational being can process the official account without noticing the blatant inconsistencies. I guess in 2001, we had a world mostly populated by morons. People happily gobbled up total nonsense. I'm not sure how much that has changed, by the way. And Mario Fury says, well, I don't believe the official Netanyahu account of October 7 either.
Well, I mean, there's a good example. Everything that we were told about October 7th turned out to be a lie. And everything that we were told about the Iraq invasion turned out to be a lie. Many people believe that everything we were told about vaccines, about COVID, about all kinds of things, the more that these things turn out to have been lies, falsehoods, the more people will believe. Even if the government is telling you the truth, people will believe they're lying.
Yeah, exactly. You have to double
That's
check.
their problem, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And so therefore, those that we used to mock as conspirators are now actually aspiring as not to be so anymore. It's very interesting. Now, yesterday we were staying up late to watch the debate until they started to debate on the matter of Israel, and of course...
I had to leave the room,
we therefore had to turn off the TV, and that was the end of it. But then came the analysis of how it went, and how Kamala seems to have surprised everyone. But did she cheat? Did you hear about the earpiece?
There's a story that she's got earrings on that are in fact...
Ones like these, honey. These
audio.
here.
But these are not audio,
These
are
are
they?
not audio, don't worry. No one is whispering anything into my ear. This is a straightforward conversation.
But that allegation is there. But even if they were not audio earrings, which is quite a good idea, by the way.
Very good idea.
You could get them and I can...
Tell me everything I need to say.
Yes.
I mean, they helpfully send the link of where you can get these
remind
earrings.
you to buy milk and so on. But even if that was not the case, the blatant bias of the hosts is actually too numerous. We don't have time to go through them all. It's just unbelievable bias. But why did Trump agree to that system? To those people? Why did he agree to his podium being a different size to hers. They said that, no, Trump will look too tall, she'll look too short, because apparently she's really very short. So they changed the size of the podiums. He agreed to all these terms.
This is also accommodate her, of course, because she was the one who refused to debate with him at first at all.
Do you think that she'll want another debate, or will she try and quit? Well, she might or might not be ahead.
She'll get the earrings and ask for another debate.
Yeah.
Two more I've got here. Very interesting one from Kevin in Greece. It says, Dear Mr. Galloway, with the hint from Biden that the US and NATO forces might use long-range missiles in the near future to hit targets deep inside Russia, and considering the joint naval exercises now being carried out between Russia and China, might it be time for China to fully enter the ongoing conflict with NATO and support Russia militarily on the battlefield?
Well, I think that time is long past, but I don't run China, and they're not listening to me. China is a very cautious country. It walks quietly, but it does carry a very big stick indeed. Bigger than Russia. I mean, the Chinese Navy is the mightiest navy in the whole world. But they don't go throwing their weight around.
No, they don't show it.
And they have been remarkably reluctant to show on the political stage the kind of strength that they have accrued economically. So I don't expect them to do that. They are as close as can be with Russia now. Their economies are galloping ahead and in tandem, if not indeed in union. The recent summit in Vladivostok in the Russian Far East that some of our friends were invited to indicated the sheer scale of the economic cooperation and interdependence, actually, of Russia and China. And no one should underestimate the significance of that, because the entire geopolitical strategy of the US for decades was to try and keep Russia and China as far apart as possible. If possible, to make them enemies of each other.
Exactly. What about this then? Because today BRICS confirms that 159 participants will adopt the new global payment system, isolating the US dollar.
That's extraordinary.
Amazing.
If true. I say this. I mean, I'm skeptical about many things that are said about and sometimes even by the BRICS. Yeah.
It's too good to be true?
I keep hearing that things are going to happen that then don't happen. I keep hearing that countries are going to join it who don't. So I'm skeptical about BRICS news. But if 159 countries leave the dollar orbit, it's curtains, for Kamala and for Donald. It's curtains for the dollar.
One more,
if that happens.
One more from Paddy McIntyre, because the interview you just had with Sarah Wilkinson was powerful. And he says, it reminds me of when the RUC police in Northern Ireland used to pick me up in the 80s. They used to put the fear of God in you. It's part of the deal. It is all to frighten you by intimidation and fear to destroy you, but mostly it is to invade your privacy and expose you to indignity. Indignity, isn't it? To leave you there. And
although who could conclude that that Sarah Wilkinson is the one that lost her dignity in that affair? Who could conclude that? It makes the British police look appalling. Also makes them look really stupid. Mutts, actually. I mean, who but a mutt asks in a recorded interview in a police station, why are Palestinians better than white people? I mean, who'd want to stand over that question in a courtroom? Makes them look stupid, makes them look vile and venal and violent and aggressive, and makes them look, as Sarah put it, I was quite surprised she did, because she's quite a radical person. It's just not British. It is just not British, this kind of behavior. My grandfathers fought in the desert and at Monte Cassino against Hitler so that Britain would never be the kind of country where ordinary citizens will be treated like Sarah Wilkinson was treated. So if it's about indignity, the indignity isn't hers, it's theirs. Anything else?
You're right. No, I just want to say that I hope if we don't further this pattern of interviewing people who have been detained, arrested.
It is a bit alarming that so many of our guests have been in handcuffs, even to the point of bleeding from their wrists. Get your coat, Gayatri. We're going for chips, but let me take Tony in Manchester on 9/11 first. Tony, what do you want to say?
Hi, George. I came to listen to you when you spoke in Stockport about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I handed you a book in 2 parts, Solving 9/11 by Christopher Bollin, an independent journalist. Now, I don't know if you ever got the chance to read it, but this guy, it took him 10 years to write this book. He was an independent journalist based in America and had to flee America, but he's also lived in Israel for quite some time. I think his wife's Israeli, so he knows the game inside out. I urge anybody to... This set of books is still available on Amazon. It's called Solving 9/11, The Deception That Changed the World. Christopher Bollin, Bollyn. He's also got a website, ChristopherBollin.com, and it's just full of stuff. This book is unbelievable. Just quickly... It goes through they reckon it took about 20 years to plan this, and it goes in fine detail of how Mossad, no doubt with CIA and whoever else, got people in place all the way through the stages of this massive deception from Israeli companies taking over the security of the Twin Towers. And the actual port, the port authority where all the steel was going to be shipped out, how it took them a few goes before they got accepted to take that security rollover. And then quickly, you've got the 5 dancing Israelis that were seen down, as the towers came down, they were doing high fives with each other on the roof of a building not far from the site where...
Indeed. And they were arrested. But where they are now, who knows?
Well,
Tony, thanks
Israel,
for that, and a belated thanks for giving me that book. And no, I didn't get a chance to read it, but I will check out the website that you mentioned. Final 9/11 comments. Bram SL11 says, as a veteran, I was aboard the ship when 9/11 occurred. I recall on the radio, we listened to that. There were reports of explosions in the basements of both buildings before the planes ever hit. Peter Sayre says, even if there was a cover-up about 9/11, what will happen? All the damage has been done. Charlotte Byrne says, it looked fishy to me from the get-go, but Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 sealed it for me. Bush's expression when reading My Pet Goat, the way they flew the bin Laden family out, etc. And Saeed Hanoun says only bin Laden planes were allowed to fly that day. Everything else was grounded. Indeed, it is a deep, deep, murky story. But lies always, in the end, tumble forth. The truth always will out, because the more people have to know about a crime being committed, the chances of that crime remaining undetected, unresolved forever are vanishingly small. And as our excellent guest, all the guests have been terrific tonight, our excellent guest Ted Walter put it, now we have, of course there's still lots of sheep who'll bar their way through life, but there are a lot of ace sleuths out there, a lot of young people who are super savvy in the technological arts and are as determined as older campaigners like Sarah Wilkinson and even me to get to the truth on the great issues of our time. So I am confident that the tipping point that Ted Walter described is almost upon us. And if and when that tipping point is tipped, its consequences cannot possibly be overstated. They cannot but profoundly change the structure, character, nature, and the personnel in power in Western countries forever. It will take time, but the truth will out. The Tower of Lies will fall down. And on that note, on 9/11/2024, I bid you good night. By the way, come back on Wednesday and come back on Tuesday. Come back on Sunday. I caught the director off guard, you see. I finished early, which is the reason for this fiasco.